Okay, today we are going to go through lesson 8, which is choosing the best method to solve our quadratics. Before we go into how to choose the best method, the first thing we needed to review is all the methods that we've learned in this unit. So this is unit 3. Remember, anytime we're solving quadratics, a quadratic is just something that has a variable squared. So this has x squared, so this is a quadratic equation. We learned how to solve multiple different ways. If we're solving by graphing, this is where we're going to use our graphing calculator. So we are going to use the graphing calculator. And I'm going to pull that up in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to remind you of how we led into graphing. We learned a formula. We learned a formula called the axis of symmetry. That axis of symmetry is the formula x equals negative b over 2a. This helps us find that vertex point. Remember, the vertex point is the very lowest or the very highest point on our graph. Our b is 6 times 2 times a, so negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So we know that our vertex point, to find our vertex point, we've already found the x is negative 3. We need to find the y. The y is where 0's at. So we take our equation, we replace 0 with y, and then we're now solving. We're going to substitute in negative 3 into each of these pieces. Now notice this is a long drawn out process. I can calculate all this. I'm going to get negative 4. Y is equal to negative 4. So our other point in our ordered pair, so our vertex is at negative 3, negative 4. Make a point, zoom out. So I remind you that you can check putting it into the graphing calculator by doing the axis of symmetry to get the x and then substituting in x to get the y. Now I'm going to switch over and I'm going to open up Desmos. We're going to then graph this on the graphing calculator and get some more points to put to graph our equation. Remember, if I ask you to solve it by graphing, you actually have to graph the equation. You have to show me the parabola, the shape of the parabola, which means I have to graph some of these points. All right, I put in our equation. Here is our curve. Remember, I'm going to hit the gear and then the table, and it's going to give me some points. Notice that it only gives me some points up the right-hand side. I'm going to want to calculate where this one is, so I'm going to go back to my table, if it'll let me, and I'm going to add negative 3, and I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to add negative 4, I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to add negative 5. That's going to give us the points up the left side, and I'm going to add one more, negative 6. So the points on my graph, I can't see 2, and I can't see 1. Let's just delete these rows. So we're going to plot these points that I can see. Negative 2, 0. So let's do split view, slide it over so I can open up GoodNotes and we can see both of them at the same time. We're now going to graph these points. So at negative 3, I'm negative 4. At negative 4, I'm negative 3. At negative 5, I'm 0. At negative 6, I'm at a positive 5. At negative 2, I'm at negative 3. At negative 1, I'm at 0. And at 0, I'm at 5. So here is my graph. I'm going to get rid of my Desmos now. Here are the points. If I have all these points that I can see, I need to plot those points, and then I'm going to draw my curve. That is the graph of this parabola. Now we're going to record the solutions. Remember, the solutions are the two places it crosses the x-axis. These are the roots or our solutions. So when we're writing our solutions, we're going to list out both of those x numbers. X equals negative 5, comma negative 1. It crosses in two places. So when you're solving by graphing, you can use the graphing calculator. I will know that you used the graphing calculator correctly if you plot all the visible points. If you only give me some of the visible points, you will lose some credit if I ask you to solve it by graphing. You do not have to show me the algebra if it's by graphing. You just must plot the points, and then you must identify the solutions. Okay, so that was how to solve our equation by graphing. After we did by graphing, we then talked about by factoring. By factoring, you would take out a greatest common factor first always. Then, if it was a trinomial, we had whether it was a equals 1 or a is greater than 1, and then we learned to factor by the difference of squares. So all of these factoring techniques depends on what our equation looks like. So our equation, I'm going to write it down again, is x squared. Let's switch to purple. X squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. This is a trinomial. So first I'm going to see if there's a greatest common factor, and there isn't. So then I'm going to ask myself, because this is a trinomial that a equals 1, what are two numbers that multiply to be 5 but add to be 6? Remember, this is multiply to be c and add to be b. So two numbers that will multiply to be 5 are 5 and 1. They would both be positive. So my two factors are x plus 5 times x plus 1 equals 0. Now this is the factored form, but this is not our solution. Remember, to find our solution, we must create a table, and then we have to set each of the factors equal to 0 under that table. A lot of times we want to do this as mental math, and then we make the mistake because we forget that we're solving, which means we have to move over our values. So our two answers are -5, -1, which should be. We already got the answers by graphing, so our answers should be the same. We're just solving it in a different method. So factoring requires you to make sure that you understand where to start, whether it's a binomial and I'm doing difference of squares or greatest common factor, or it's a trinomial that I am factoring by what multiplies to be c and adds to be b. Okay, so that was the graphing method and the factoring method. We're now going to look at trying to solve it in the square root method. And I'm going to tell you we cannot. We cannot solve using square roots. We can't solve using square roots because there is an x term. An x term. Remember to use the square root method. To use, b has to equal 0. You have to have just ax squared plus c equals 0. You can't have a b term. So not all the methods work. Square roots only work when we're missing that b term. All right, completing the square. Completing the square. Let's write down our equation again. X squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. First step in completing the square is to move c over. When we move c over, I also am going to leave a blank. I then will divide everything by a. There isn't an a, so now I'm going to do the completing the square step. I take b, I take half of it, that answer, I square it, that number, I add. Excuse me. Apologies. That number I add to both sides. From there, we're going to factor the left side. Apologies, I got choked up on something. Okay, so we do this completing the square step, so the left side will factor. into x plus 3 squared equals, remember, we know it's 3, 1 because it multiplies to be c and adds to be b, but we can recognize the pattern. It's the thing we squared to get this factor. Negative 5 and a positive 9 is a positive 4. Our next step is we're then going to take the square root of both sides. The square root and the square cancel, and I must have plus or minus, and then square root of 4 is 2. Finally, we're going to split it into two equations. So I'm out of room going vertically. I'm now going to rewrite it here horizontally. So I'm going to split this into two equations. One where I have x plus 3 equals 2, and the other I'm going to have x plus 3 equals negative 2. Subtract that 3 over, so negative 3 plus 2, or negative 1, negative 3 minus 2, or negative 5, which is our two answers, remember. We already got those two answers. We're going to write them out again, repeat the process of writing them in set notation. Okay, so completing the square is a series of steps. If you try to look at it now, it's hard to decipher what was happening. So back up the video, rewatch it, see if you can follow those steps. Finally, the last method we learned was the quadratic formula. We're going to go ahead and rewrite the quadratic formula here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, so before we get started, we should identify what A is. A is 1, B is 6, C is 5. We're now going to plug these into our formula. Substitute in. X equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C. I think I'm going to lasso this and move it away from the work from the previous problem. Okay. Okay, back to our quadratic formula. This is all over 2 times a. Simplifying under the radical. Remember, I can't put that in my calculator. I have to simplify under the radical. So I'm going to get 36 minus 20 divided by 2. Continue simplifying it. Negative 6 plus or minus radical 16 over 2. X equals negative 6 plus or minus 4 over 2. Now we're going to create it into two equations because we have whole numbers. So I'm going to have a negative 6 plus 4 divided by 2 and a negative 6 minus 4 divided by 2. Negative 6 plus 4 is a negative 2 over 2, which is a negative 1. Negative 10 over 2, which is a negative 5, which again is the answers we were looking for. X equals negative 5, comma negative 1. Okay, that's it for page 1. We're going to start video 2 in just a moment.